Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Well, last week was a bit odd. You saw President Joe Biden accuse Facebook of actually killing people. Remember that? Here's a clip.
What's your message to platforms like Facebook?
They're killing people. I mean, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
That was odd because, of course, the Democrats and the tech companies are so often in collusion. They work together. There's a revolving door between working in the Democrat Party and working in big tech companies like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, etc. It's the same up here in Canada. You may not know this because the mainstream media doesn't talk about it a lot, but the boss for Facebook Canada, in charge of their policy, including censorship, is a man named Kevin Chan, who is less famous for having worked in the leader's office of the Liberal Party of Canada. They're truly in league with each other. And so it is not much of a surprise that one of the few truly conservative voices in Parliament is one of the voices most often censored by big tech. Take a look at this tweet from Twitter. It's a notification from Twitter to Derek Sloan, the MP for Hastings, Lennox, and Addington. He made a pretty, uncontroversial comment. I'll just read it in full. The combination of vaccine injuries and the extremely low risk that COVID poses to the young have convinced ministers in the UK to do the right thing. Where is this common sense in Canada? And then there's a link, if you can see. The link is to an underlying story, I believe it was from Reuters, which simply had that information. I don't know if you know this, but Canada is racing towards vaccinating youngsters. In the UK, they've held the line. Derek Sloan accurately retweeted that story with a comment of his own, and yet, as you can see, Twitter suspended the MP from his right to speak. So much for freedom of speech. It's not the first time that Derek Sloan has been censored. You might recall about a month ago, he held a press conference in Ottawa, including with physicians who have been silenced and censored for taking a skeptical view of the virus. That video became the #1 most watched video of all time for CPAC. That's the cable consortium that broadcasts Parliament. Alas, after a few days, that was suspended by YouTube as well. Well, joining us now, before he's completely silenced, is the MP for Hastings, Lennox, and Addington, Derek Sloan, who joins us from his constituency. I tell you, it's almost like people don't want the other side of the story being told. You're being censored almost as much as Rebel News is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as you noted, I shared a Reuters article. Hardly a far-right extremist site. So yes, it's absurd what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, let's put up on the screen again. We showed your tweet itself, but we have the larger image of what Twitter said to you. It's like Twitter court just issued a sentence. There was no trial. You had no response. You were allowed. They said, we have determined that this account violated the Twitter rules, specifically for violating the policy on spreading misleading and potentially harmful information. But you just linked to a Reuters article. And then they said, for more information on COVID-19, refer to the following links. And they send you to the China-run World Health Organization. So there's no appeal, there's no transparency. Who knows who did that, if it was someone in the World Health Organization or some intern at Twitter's head office in California. Who knows? But they just censored a member of Parliament in Canada. And what are you going to do about it?
Well, that's a great question, and really it is a bit of a kangaroo court. And guys, my kids found a bunny outside earlier.
Your kids are so cute. I just want to ask a few more questions, though. It's great to see the kids, and they're always a delight. But kids, let me talk to your dad for another minute. You know what? It's good to know that life goes on, despite politics and the ugliness of censorship. And I'll let you get back to your family right away. One of the perils of working from home. I've seen crazier eruptions and interventions than that. You've got cute kids. Hey, Derek, let me ask you, do you think it only goes one way? I've never seen politicians on the left or media on the left who get things wrong, sometimes extremely wrong. I've never seen them censored or suspended. Maybe it happens, but I've just never seen it.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I can't think of any good example of a left-wing politician getting banned. I remember there were some prominent tweets in the Israel-Palestine events that we had a little while ago by some people that were, hearkening back to even talking fondly about Hitler, and they were left-leaning type people, and I don't think they got banned. We're seeing really a political bias in the censorship, which is why I'm so concerned. I mean, censorship generally is troubling, of course, but when it has a political, motive to it, that is extremely troubling.
You're right. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, after the initial bout of church arsons in BC, the head of their Civil Liberties Association, Harsha Walia, tweeted, "Burn it all down." And that tweet is still up there. I mean, she was later, she later was driven out of the BC Civil Liberties Association. She had so discredited them. But that was not done to them by Twitter. I note that, I follow Nicolas Maduro, the tyrant of Venezuela, on Twitter. China has dozens of propaganda accounts on Twitter, many of them verified with a little blue check mark. The Ayatollah of Iran, Vladimir Putin, they're all on Twitter, but you're kicked off. Donald Trump's banned for life. I think we've got a real problem there, and I think that problem is upstream from politics, because if you can't even communicate your message, how are you ever going to win an election?
Yeah, well, you're totally right, and the censorship is getting worse. And we're seeing, in my case, they had a thing there that said, "Oh, well, you may not have been following local health advice." So, in our case, where our local health advice is different from that in the UK, does that mean I can't even share what they're doing in the UK? I mean, this is extreme. And it's bizarre, and we're seeing the Liberals, put forward legislation that's going to make this worse.
Yeah, and I'm worried that they're going to get a big boost because, of course, the White House seems so adamant. I mean, they're listing 12 enemies of the truth and demanding that Facebook censor 12 people. That's how specific they're getting. I find it terrifying. Now, I remember when we spoke a little while back, and I was asking you what your plans were, because you were formally kicked out and banned from running as a conservative. You ran and won as a conservative MP. You ran and placed well in the Conservative Party leadership. And I think it's pretty much universally accepted that you were thrown out of the party with trumped up charges because you accepted some small donation from someone who was hiding their real name that no one ever heard of, that the party had said, it was just such a cooked up excuse. They wanted to get rid of you. And back then, we didn't quite know what you were up to. If I understand correctly, you've decided to run again as an independent. Is that right?
So I'm going to be running again. I'm also creating, I'm also going to be touring across the country. I believe that, parties and these kinds of things come secondary to political movements. And I am actively recruiting a Liberty slate of candidates to run in Canada. Now, there are a few good conservatives that I like. There's obviously some PPC candidates, but I'm going to do everything I can to ensure there's a solid, common sense candidate with integrity in every riding in the country. And I'll be out in Alberta actually very soon. So I want your followers out there to stay tuned. I'm going to be doing a tour in Alberta to try and save this great country that we have.
All right, well, let me ask you a few questions about what that means. I mean, I know what a party is. It has a certain structure, and importantly, it allows the issuance of tax receipts. In fact, extremely generous tax credits, more even than a regular charity, if I'm not mistaken. It also allows that party to be affixed to the candidate's name on a ballot. So there's some real benefits that come from being a party. You use the word slate. I don't know if that has any legal meaning. It's just a group of people. Would these people just all be independents, or, as you mentioned, would some of them be PPC? How does this overlap with what Maxime Bernier's party is doing. You mentioned conservatives. Would any Conservative Party of Canada person be on the slate? Like, help me understand what you mean.
Well, I want to ensure that there is a candidate worth voting for in every single riding in the country. Now, you mentioned different organizational things. In the long run, all of those options are on the table, and I'm actively looking at several of them. I want to make sure that if an election is called in August, as some of the rumors say, that in as large a portion of the country as possible, there is a candidate worth voting for. So there are different, in some cases that might be a conservative. In many cases, it won't be. But this is the type of thing that I want to make sure is in place in the event of an early election.
You know what? I see I see a number of people who are skeptics about the lockdown, who are voices for what I would call freedom or liberty. But there's a disunity there, a splitism. I see it provincially in Ontario. I see it provincially in Alberta, where they're creating more parties. And I get it. People have their particular vision. But the left calls that splitism. And you split the right so many times, you're going to really guarantee the other guys win. I mean, I note that in your own riding, you beat the Liberal by about 4 or 5% last time. So, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle for you to collect the majority of the votes. How do you overcome that splitism? Not just you, but how does what remains of the Liberty movement? How, provincially in Ontario, you got Roman Baber, you got Randy Hillier, you got Jim and Belinda Karahelios, and they each sort of feel to me like they want to be the boss. I don't know. I feel like cobbling together some sort of unified movement is necessary, but I don't know if I see it happening. Certainly not in time for the next election. Am I wrong in my hunch?
Well, unity is always imperative, and it's incumbent upon all of us to work towards that. I do think, though, that no matter what happens, we need to make sure that we have a reasonable alternative that's ready. And, as far as I'm concerned, the Conservative Party as a structure, there are a few MPs that I would still endorse, but as a structure is not, capable of winning. And even if by some miracle they did, our country would not be way better off than it is now. It's the same policies, just not quite as extreme as the Liberals. So we need to have a true Canadian alternative. And at this point in the game, with an election looming, it could be, several groups of people working together. And you mentioned a few of them. But we need to make sure that all hands are on deck. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm hoping to unify the movement along with others. But I do also believe that, even if we had several options, only one of them will win the hearts and minds of Canadians. And hopefully we can come together as a group and win the hearts and minds of Canadians united. But I do think it is possible.
Yeah. You know what? I just have one more comment. I don't want to come across as a naysayer. I regard myself as a fan of yours. I believe you're strong in policy. I think you're an excellent communicator. I think the attacks on you, both in the media and by the Conservative Party, were trumped up. But I do have a real question that I would put to anyone who says what you say. And that is, I happened to, when I was a young man, so many years ago in the 20th century, I saw Preston Manning build a party from scratch. And now there's 338 ridings, like just to travel to 10 provinces and 3 territories, just to vet the candidates. Preston was on the road 200 plus days a year. And it was hard work building the people infrastructure. I mean, I guess it's a little bit different these days with the internet, but you still have to find good people, good candidates, good door knockers, good donors. It's just such an enormous job. I wonder how much of a dent you'll be able to make in it before the next election. And I don't mean to come across as pulling down what you're saying. I just remember the last guy who built a national political force, and by the way, it ran out of steam before it finished its work. And it was a 10-year project for Preston Manning. It was more than that.
Well, you know what? I don't intend to say that I'm going to do it by myself. And there's other groups that have already laid the foundations. And of course, even this past year of the Liberty movement working in its own way has been laying the seeds. But I do think that more than ever, Canadians are looking and hoping for a alternative to what we have. And I hope to be able to bring it. And I'm not saying I'm bringing it on my own or apart from other people. I think the work that Maxime Bernier and others are doing is great. And I hope to work together with all the different groups that have been pushing for liberty and these types of things and bring them together, but also mold that into a political solution. Yeah. And the People's Party is part of that. But I think that we have to bring everybody together.
You know, I'll argue against myself for a minute because I feel like I'm being too negative. Donald Trump showed that you could create a political infrastructure in a very short period of time if you have an excellent and resonant message. And I would also say that things are so desperately bad in Canada with a total failure of all institutions, governments and oppositions, courts, lawyers, professors, popular culture. There's a total void on so many of these key issues. So I think that, I suppose there is a chance out there, and we'll certainly be following it. We'll be watching you. We'll be watching you in your riding of Hastings, Lennox, and Addington, excuse me, that's the old name for the riding. And listen, it's great to see you fighting out there, and I'm sure no matter what happens, if it's a new party or your own riding or some new entity, I'm sure it'll be worth following. And I appreciate you giving us an update.
Well, I appreciate it. And all I can say is whether we succeed or fail, someone must try. And I've dedicated my work in politics right now to saving this country with whoever wants to join me. And there's many good people out there, and I meet them all the time. And I'm just so thankful to see so many people on the ground. And the work that you're doing at Rebel is part of it as well. So thank you so much.
Well, right on. Now, what's the website that people can find out more? Or let's say someone's watching this and they want to meet up with you out west or electronically. Is there a website they should go to?
If they can go to www.dereksloan.ca, sign up for my emails, and you'll get briefed on all that's going on out there.
All right. Well, great to see you again, and great to see your kids again. They're a hoot, and it sounds like they're living a normal life as best they can in these crazy times. Nice to see you again, Derek.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Right on. There you have it, Derek Sloan, the MP for Hastings, Lennox, and Addington. I did get that name right. There used to be a Frontenac in there, too, in the olden days. And he joined us from his riding via Skype. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.